I am Lisa Karlin Curtis. I am one of the founding engineers at Incident.io. We're an incident management platform, and obviously if you're interested in that, please come and find me after the talk. But I will now stop talking about what I do for most of my job and start just talking about catalogs. So I've spent the last 2 years working primarily on our sort of catalog set of features. And through that time, I've talked to a lot of customers about their experiences building and maintaining catalogs across, building their own, buying various different tools in. And catalogs promise a lot of things. So at my previous role, we'd implemented a service catalog, and it had been, honestly, a really rubbish experience. We'd spent a ton of effort on it, and we ended up with something that was okay, but it really didn't feel like value for money for all the effort that we'd put in. And pretty much everyone agrees that service catalogs are useful. And so when we started talking to customers, I was waiting to find out not just all the amazing things that they'd done, but finally understand what had gone so wrong at the version that I'd seen. And don't get me wrong, I heard some amazing stories about the cool things that people are now doing with their catalogs. But I also heard the same things over and over, which started to feel hauntingly familiar. It took us forever to build. It's not quite ready yet, but it's nearly there. And I'm not even sure if the data's right anymore. And almost everybody said, we'd love to see more people using it. And so I started to wonder, maybe my experience in my last role wasn't so unique after all. And maybe, hopefully, there's a better way. So we're just going to walk through why would you build a catalog in the first place, what makes it difficult, and then maybe how can we do better. So at Incident, we talk about a catalog as a connected map of everything in your organization. And when we were building ours, we joked about the tagline, connecting everything, everywhere, all at once, and then we didn't use it because we didn't want to get sued. But I stand by it as an explanation of what a great catalog should be. And ultimately, it's a database or a graph. It might store services, teams, infrastructure information. But ultimately, it's a list of things, and it's a list of connections between those things. And you can use a catalog to decide which team to page when something goes wrong. Or maybe to give a bird's eye view of a service with useful links to pull requests, incidents, monitoring dashboards in one quick, easy place. Or maybe to help avoid your pre-audit scramble by collecting data as you go through the year and making your annual audits much less painful. So why is it hard? To explain this, I'm going to tell a story, which is really a combination of all of these stories that I've heard over the last couple of years about what implementing a catalog feels like and what are maybe the potential pitfalls. The story starts with lofty ambitions and big ideas. You've gone to a tech conference and you've listened to someone like me yap on about how great a service catalog is. And you go back and you talk to your engineering managers and your tech leads from across the org, and you make a list of their pain points which you think the catalog can solve. And you put together a business case. And it's such a long list that you go, yeah, this feels like the next thing, the next step on our journey as a platform team. And it becomes the next big ticket item on your roadmap. How long is it going to take? I don't know, a couple of months. And so you start with your classic build versus buy decision, writing out a list of use cases, weighing up the pros and cons of various tools, feature comparison matrices, all that great stuff. You share a document for other engineers to read, but you don't really get as much traction as you'd hoped, and you need to get building. So after a few opinions from some key managers, you decide to use a paid tool so you can get set up nice and fast. Let's get building. And so you open your laptop on day one of the build, and you go, hey, do we have a list of services? And you talk to some tech leads and from some other teams, and you quickly conclude that no, you do not have a list of services. And so you start making a list. And you write a list of all the services that your team owns or that you know about, probably the big ones, the ones that go down a lot, the ones that you worked on last quarter. Then you realize you can pull a list of pods from all of the clusters that you run. Maybe you can work backwards from there. But then you discover that the names of the pods are maybe not as helpful as you had hoped. And so ultimately you realize that you're undertaking a huge information gathering exercise, and arguably some archaeology to go with it, from across the organization, both wide and also through the depths of history. You go to your monthly tech lead meeting and you present the plan for building out your service catalog. You ask each of them to go and take a look at the list of pods, map them to a service in a big spreadsheet, maybe fill in a form to answer a couple of other questions about, is it using the newest infra? What are its dependencies? And then add anything that might be missing. Sounds simple enough. You've had responses from some of your tech leads, but you've also discovered that this just isn't a priority for many of them. They've got incidents to handle, shipping deadlines to meet, angry customers breathing down their neck. And this isn't something that they're going to be assessed on or held accountable for. They aren't crying out for a catalog. Many aren't really that sure what value it's going to provide when it's done. And you don't have the authority or the social capital to change their mind. And so you end up spending your days chasing the busiest people in the engineering org and burning all your social capital in the process. As you are chasing the rest of the org, people begin to meaningfully engage with what you're building and why, often for the first time. Because it turns out it's not until you actually ask people to do something that they really want to understand why they're doing it. By now, you're spending most of your energy persuading people that this is a worthwhile thing for them to contribute to, that you've chosen the right tools, the right approach. Shall we reopen that build versus buy discussion that we had 6 weeks ago? Wouldn't that be fun? You also probably find that you did make some bad assumptions in your initial scoping. Now people are really engaging. You start to build a better picture about what the most valuable information that you could gather actually is. And you realize that to get buy-in, you probably have to change some things about your approach. Ask for some extra information. Maybe even ask people to store it or input it into a different way. We all love a good YAML versus JSON argument, after all. But you know this is for the best. You'll get a better outcome if you engage with everybody in this way. It just feels a bit rubbish. And so now you go and find yourself chasing those same tech leads again that you'd already spoken to and doing a second pass, asking for more information, and then going and chasing some more people, and some more people, and some more people, and some more people. And eventually, you start escalating to managers to get engagement from the last few holdouts. And you do get what you need from them, but it's at a cost. Their first experience with this catalog thing is an actively hostile interaction where they're being forced to spend time away from what they see as their top priorities. And at this point, you've burned any social capital that you had, and then some. You're in debt. And then you have a major security incident. It's a near miss, luckily, but word comes down from on high, quite correctly, that there's a new P1 project that your team needs to pick up. And we'll have to pause the catalog work. It can wait, while we shore up our infrastructure to make sure this can never happen again. See you in a couple of months. And so we're back. You go to a company meeting where someone's talking about the MVP of a new fraud detection service that they've been working on. And you realize that that's not represented in your catalog at all. The team hasn't kept it up to date. How many other things have changed since you started gathering that data? But ultimately, you decide that it just doesn't matter. You need to launch this thing so that you can start building features that use the catalog, integrating it with your other tools, and get out of this never-ending death spiral of data collection that you seem to have found yourselves in. And so you turn up one bright Monday morning and announce in Slack, we've launched the catalog. And you look around and no one else really seems to care that much, but you go and you run a demo with the whole of engineering, and everyone nods and says, oh, that's neat. And you tap yourselves on the back for a job well done. And then everyone goes back to their day-to-day, as if nothing has really happened. Over the next 6 months, your team continues to find different ways that you can use the catalog. And you run an internal survey, asking engineering how often do they use the catalog, and what they find most useful 6 months on. But the response is underwhelming. Some of the data's not quite right. That service dependency graph is cool. I don't really use it that much, to be honest. And when you reflect as a team, you conclude that we'd love to see more people using it. So, what went wrong? We've ended up with 3 big problems. We don't really remember why we built it. We didn't have, and still don't have, buy-in from the rest of the org. And the data is not staying up to date. So let's see what we can learn. We started with unclear objectives. Remember that massive list of things that the catalog was going to do? That person at the conference told you. But having so many different objectives makes it really difficult to deliver value on any single one. Your focus is constantly split, trying to make a catalog that can be all things to all people. It's an easy mistake to make. When you wrote your business case, no one of these problems would justify such a large piece of work. But together, that's what made it a no-brainer. But when we start building a catalog, we seem to forget everything that we already know about building products. To build a good product, you have to be focused on the problem, not the solution. But with a catalog, the problem is so multifaceted that instead, all of our focus is drawn to the solution. How are we going to get this data that we don't currently have? What tool are we going to put it in? How are we going to store it? And just like building any other product, we want to be delivering value incrementally. Focus on the first minimum valuable product. What's the first thing that we could do that would add value? How fast can I get there? And then we know we do that again and again and again. But that's not how we build catalogs. Maybe the first thing that we build shouldn't have been a catalog at all. Maybe we just need to reorganize our infra repo so that all the configuration relating to a service can live in a single file. Or maybe it's a Notion database where you can put all your runbooks and tag them against some list of services. Those projects aren't failures, they're useful steps that solve problems and build out a catalog that's valuable for your team over time, always looking for the next valuable increment. So on to problem 2. We just didn't have enough buy-in from the org. You'll remember that in our story, we spent a lot of time chasing people from around the organization. And that process used a lot of social capital. And it left key people around the org feeling bored, grumpy, and confused. We were asking people to take time out of their busy schedules to do something fundamentally incredibly boring, write a list of things that they own and fill in forms about them. And remember, we didn't deliver any value back to those people for nearly 5 months. Once again, focusing on incremental value would really have helped us here. And it's much easier to get buy-in for a smaller piece of work with clear goals when you're delivering value back to your teams quickly and iteratively. Again, just like we do with our products. And the other trap that we fell into was to prioritize breadth over depth. When you're making a list and checking it twice, it's really easy to become fixated on finishing the damn list. Finishing the list is really satisfying. And as an engineer, it feels great to have everything written down and categorized just so. But we risk falling foul of the 80-20 rule. Gathering that long tail of data is incredibly time-consuming. It uses all of our social capital, and it's often, at the end of it, not really the valuable bit at all. Instead of trying to provide a thin layer of value to the whole org, we can instead focus on just a single team. Again, that makes our first project much more achievable. We don't have to do something for all 300 services or 3,000 that the organization has. We can just make it feel really good for 15 services that this one team has ownership on. And we can choose our team carefully. Maybe a team that has a bit more space in their roadmap, a team that we've worked with before and have some strong social bonds. We can iterate quickly on their feedback, make them feel much more part of the process, and deliver incremental value as we go. And once we've got something that feels good, once you have champions in the org that will advocate, then we can go out to other teams and get buy-in. You can show them exactly what they'll get if they take the time to gather the data. You can put gates so that the new things that you are shipping, they can move on to by opting into the catalog. And you can continue to deliver value despite a handful of teams that just don't want to engage right now. And maybe they never will. That doesn't make this a failure. And so we come to our final problem, which is the data is rotting. We found ourselves trapped into a negative cycle. The catalog data isn't quite right. I don't trust it, so I don't want to build things with it. So the catalog doesn't do anything for me, so it's not worth me taking the time to update the catalog. When building a catalog, you have to remember that data, if it's not being used, it will rot. Engineering organizations and systems change quickly, and so the data becomes stale. And once it's stale, it's not just unhelpful, it's actively harmful. If the data isn't accurate, our negative cycle is almost inevitable. People lose trust in the data, and after that, it's really hard to win it back. The only way to keep data from going stale is to use it. And displaying data on a web page does not count as using it. If your catalog contains the data about which services are deploying into which clusters, it should decide which services are deploying into which clusters. If it stores a list of which teams own which services, it should decide who gets paged when there's alert against that service. And if the wrong person gets paged, I promise they'll fix the catalog data pretty quickly. Well, as long as they can change the data. If someone can't change the data because it's either time-consuming or it feels unsafe, the data will rot, and fast. And the last thing that you want is to become the gatekeepers of that data, receiving endless requests to make small changes, which will eventually dry up as people just stop bothering. And that means, and this sounds really obvious, people need to know where the data is, and they also need to have the confidence to change it. A classic example of this going wrong results in an overloaded IT or people ops team who are responsible for managing team membership, leaving the on-paper org chart to drift further and further from reality. And when you get this wrong and the data becomes stale, engineers, we're a really good bunch of problem solvers, and we'll find another way of solving our problem. Like adding a hacky redirect to your paging software to redirect alerts to the right team. Yes, I've seen it happen, and yes, it was a bad idea. So let's recap our key takeaways. Clarity is key. With so many possible objectives floating around, it's easy to lose sight of the big picture. But by focusing on incremental value and tackling problems one step at a time, we can deliver incremental value. Start small with a single team and deliver quick wins to preserve your social capital, so you can use it when you need it most. And prioritize depth over breadth. It's better to make one team love you than have every team just about remember that you exist. Collect data which you can use and prioritize the data that you can use, and then continue to use it so that it can't rot. Make it easy for everybody to update the source data and keep it fresh. And that's me. Thanks so much for listening. If you've got any questions, fire them in Slack.